Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu rasulillah, wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa man sara ala sabilihi ila yawmiddin amma ba'd. So in continuing discussing the book Bulugh al-Maram by Ibn Ḥajar al-ʿAsqalānī rahimahullah, where we're now discussing concerning Kitab al-Buyu, so discussing the hadith that have been mentioned regarding al-Ahkam al-Buyu, business transaction. So Ibn Ḥajar rahimahullah, that he mentioned regarding concerning, as he titled there, shuruti, regarding concerning of those conditions that are attached to a business transaction. Then also he mentioned وَمَا نُهِيَ عَنْهُ مِنْهُ, and also those business transactions that are considered to be impermissible. So of those hadith that he have mentioned regarding this particular discussion, he mentioned the hadith of Jabir ibn Abdullah radiallahu anhu that also discussed concerning certain of those criteria regarding business transaction that is to be discussed. So he mentioned the hadith of Jabir ibn Abdullah that shows regarding that certain things are permissible or not permissible regarding certain business transaction. So the hadith will be read, and then we'll go through concerning discussing the hadith and the benefits and the ahkam that can be taken from it. Aywa.
Alhamdulillah. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. Hadith number 652 from Bab al-Buyu'. Narrated Jabir ibn Abdullah radiyallahu anhu. I was traveling on a camel of mine, which had become exhausted, so I intended to let it go free. The Prophet ﷺ followed me and made supplication for me and struck it. Then it went as it had never done before. Then he then said, "Sell it to me for 1 uqiyah." I replied, "No." He again said, "Sell it to me." So I sold it to him for 1 uqiyah. However, I stipulated that I should be allowed to ride it home. Then when I reached home, I took the camel to him and he paid me its price in cash. I then went back and he sent someone after me. When I came, he said, "Do you think that I asked you to reduce the value of your camel's price? To take it, take your camel and your money, for it's yours." Agreed upon, and this was Muslim's wording.
So concerning this, the hadith that the author, Ibn Ḥajar rahimahullah, I've mentioned regarding of those matters that relates to the ahkam of buyu. So he mentioned the hadith of Jabir ibn Abdullah radiallahu anhuma, where this hadith discussed concerning an event that occurs with Jabir ibn Abdullah and also the Prophet ﷺ, and the ahkam that can be taken from this regarding a business transaction that both of them were involved in. So regarding concerning the hadith that is mentioned, we'll go through the hadith and discuss the ahkam that can be taken from the hadith. But also he mentioned, Ibn Ḥajar rahimahullah, regarding concerning takhrij of the hadith, he mentioned muttafaqun alayh, that the hadith is found or collected by both Bukhari and Muslim in their collection. That he mentioned وَهَذَا سِيَاقٌ لِلْمُسْلِمِ, but also the wording of this hadith is the word that is found in Imam, but it's found with Imam Muslim rahimahullah. So this hadith is with Bukhari and Muslim, but the wording that he chose is the wording that is taken from Imam Muslim regarding this hadith. This hadith, when Imam Bukhari rahimahullah mentioned hadith, you have some slight changes in the word or differences in words that is mentioned between Bukhari and Muslim, but he chose to use the wording of Imam Muslim rahimahullah. So also this hadith, it has been mentioned by Imam Bukhari in several places in Sahih Bukhari. So in Sahih Bukhari or al-Jami' Sahih, that hadith is mentioned several places. So of those things that he discussed regarding concerning, or we will discuss, is regarding the Sahabi that is mentioned here with the narrator of the hadith. So he mentioned Jabir ibn Abdullah radiallahu anhuma, where, as we mentioned before concerning Jabir ibn Abdullah, that his name is Jabir ibn Abdullah ibn Amr ibn Haram al-Ansari. So it's Jabir ibn Abdullah ibn Amr ibn Haram al-Ansari, and also that Jabir, that he and also his father are both Sahabi. So we have Sahabi ibn Sahabi. So Jabir and also his father Abdullah both are Sahaba. Then also he mentioned that Jabir radiallahu anhu, that he participated in many battles, over 19 battles with the Prophet ﷺ, and also eventually he died in Medina. So he died in the city of Medina, and they mentioned that when he died, that he was over the age of 94. So Jabir radiallahu anhu was 94 sana, so he died at the age of 94 years. And as for the hadith that he have narrated, that they can be found in many books of hadith. So Jabir, that is hadith, can be found in many books. As for the Kutubu Sitta, that is hadith are mentioned in Kutubu Sitta. And those Kutubu Sitta will be Bukhari, Muslim, Abu Dawud, At-Tirmidhi, An-Nasahi, and also Ibn Majah, and as we mentioned, other books of hadith. So as for the hadith that also regarding at-takhrij that he mentioned, muttafaqun alayh, then also this hadith, meaning the hadith is found in Bukhari and Muslim, and also both Bukhari and Muslim have narrated the hadith of Jabir. But we mentioned a slight difference in the wording, so but he chose to mention the wording of Imam Muslim regarding what is mentioned here. As for the hadith that they have mentioned regarding concerning that the takhrij of the hadith in further, that mentioned the hadith can be found also other than Sahih Bukhari and Muslim. The hadith can be found with Imam Ahmad in his Musnad. Also the hadith can be found with An-Nasa'i, Tahawi in Sharh al-Mushkil. Also the hadith is found in Ibn Hibban. So those are others who have narrated the hadith. So others who have also collected this particular hadith that is mentioned here on the hadith of Jabir in Adillat. So as for the fawahid and the ahkam that can be taken from the hadith, then as we read through the hadith, that will mention certain explain. So it mentioned regarding concern that this hadith, and we'll use concerning that with this particular hadith that Ibn Uthaymeen went into in length in discussing the hadith regarding the fawaid that can be taken. So he mentioned regarding concern hadith, he mentioned al-Jamal, as I mentioned, Jabir ibn Abdullah radiyallahu anhu قال أنه كان يسير على جمل له أعيا. So I mentioned that Jabir ibn Abdullah that he had this camel, and the word concerning Jamal. So Ibn Uthaymeen rahimahullah, he mentioned concerning al-Jamal, ذكر الإبل, Ibil. So it's the male of so the word al-Jamal, it is the male amongst the camels. So amongst the male of the camel that they are called Jamal. So he mentioned concerning where these ones that they are more stronger, that regarding and also that they are able to can carry more, take more pressure, and they are more sturdy and more stronger regarding concerning amongst the camels. So he had this camel, anhu, Jabir bin Abdullah. Then he mentioned regarding concerning that he would use of this camel during his journey and his travels. So and also with this matter, they mentioned that this particular journey, the safar that he was with the Prophet ﷺ with, he mentioned that Ibn Ḥajar that this journey, it was actually a ghazwa, it was actually a battle that they were involved in. So Jabir, he rode his camel with him. There's a khilaf between the ulama as to exactly which of the battles that this occurred, this incident, as to which battle this occurred. Of the ulama who mentioned was Ghazwat Tabuk, the battle of Tabuk, and also mentioned Khil, that Ghazwat Dhat al-Riqa. So others mention Ghazwat Dhat al-Riqa, and it is mentioned that Ibn Ḥajar rahimullah that mentioned that annahu fi Ghazwat Dhat al-Riqa, that Ibn Ḥajar al-ʿAsqalānī that also that is more inclined towards that this incident occurred regarding concerning the battle of Dhat al-Riqa. Regarding concern that the Prophet that he had a discussion with Jabir regarding that battle. So overall, he mentioned that also regarding concern the hadith that it mentioned that a'ya. So the word a'ya meaning concerning that tab wa annahu daif. So it means concerned that Jamal, it was somewhat weak, and also as mentioned now, over exalted by the journey they and were upon. Then it mentioned regarding concern that as for this matter, that then he mentioned that also Ibn Uthaymeen rahimahullah mentioned concerning whether that is, as we mentioned before, stated that there's a difference regarding exactly which battle it took place. But whether it was this one or that one, then that per se doesn't per se change regarding concerning that much regarding the story. So the story concerning what is mentioned in the hadith, that difference in which battle it occurred wouldn't per se change much regarding the authenticity of the hadith or the impact of the hadith and what can be taken from the hadith. So it mentioned regarding concern, it mentioned فَأَرَادَ أَنْ يُسَيِّبُهُ, that he wanted an يُسَيِّبَهُ, that he wanted kind of somewhat to free this camel. Based upon that, it was somewhat weak, not functioning as expected. So he wanted to let go and to free this camel so it can be left. And also that he will continue his journey by walking. So he will continue his journey by walking. So, or he would have traveled with someone else. So he would either accompanied or travel along with someone else on their camel. So it shows regarding concerning, so he wished to release the animal. Then it mentioned فَلَقِيَتْ أَنْفَ لحقني Nabi alayhi salam, so the Prophet Islam, that he met up with him, so the Prophet Islam, that he met up with Jabir, and as he was behind, so he caught up with Jabir radiallahu anhu. Then I mentioned فَدَعْ لِي وَضَرَبَهُ. Then he alayhi salam, when he caught up with Jabir radiallahu anhu, that he kind of somewhat, he made a supplication for Jabir camel, and then he somewhat strike the camel. Then they mentioned قال فَسَارَ سَيْرًا لَمْ يُسِرْ مِثْلَهُ. Then the camel after this, when the Prophet made a supplication for the camel, then the camel he started to become more, active. It becomes, so the camel also started to gain its strength. So it kind of somewhat, with the supplication of the Prophet Islam, that a supplication was answered. That supplication was answered, where the camel now start to function as expected. And even more than it would before. Then it mentioned فَسَارَ سَيْرًا لَمْ يَسِرْ مِثْلَهُ. So the camel start to act as it was expected of them, and start to function properly. Then it mentioned that فَقَالَ الْإِسْلَامُ فَقَالَ. Then he mentioned concerning the hadith, the Prophet Islam mentioned at the Prophet says بِعْنِهِ. That the Prophet Islam kind of mentioned that, for you to sell me this animal. The Prophet Islam proposed for Jabir to sell him this animal. Then it mentioned that he refused. فَقَالَ. Then he refused to. Then he alayhi salam kind of mentioned بِعْنِهِ بِأَوْقِيَةٍ. That he alayhi salam, the Prophet Islam, that proposed that he proposed for Jabir to sell him this camel. Then Jabir, and he told him for a certain price, for a certain amount, regarding the price to be paid for the camel. Then فَقَالْ فَقُلْتُ لَا. Then Jabir, he refused and said no. Then it mentioned that he alayhi salam said this again to him. Then eventually Jabir called فَبِعْتُهُ بِأَوْقِيَةٍ. Then he decided I would sell the camel to the Prophet alayhi salam for the amount that he had offered. So the Prophet was the one who put and offered, and then Jabir eventually he accepted the offer that was made. Then I mentioned اشترطت حملانه إلى أهلي. Then I mentioned that also Jabir, who was the one who was selling the camel, then he stipulated or put a stipulation to the purchase. So to the sale of the animal, that Jabir also stipulated certain type of condition, which is for the animal, for him still to use the animal until he arrived back to his family, back to Medina. So they were on their way back to Medina. They haven't arrived in Medina, but then Jabir wanted that I will sell you the animal, but I would surrender or will give you the animal when I return back to Medina, but until then I will still use the animal. So he mentioned that فَلَمَّا بَلَغْتُ أَتَيْتُهُ بِجَمَلٍ. Then he mentioned that now when I return and arrive back in Medina, then I gave him the animal. فَقَالَ فَنَقَدَنِي ثَمَنَهُ. Then he paid him upfront. The Prophet Islam, that he was paid upfront regarding the animal. ثُمَّ رَجَعْتُ. Then he returned فَأَرْسَلْ فِي أَثَرِي فَقَالَ. Then he mentioned to know that someone followed him. Then فَقَالَ alayhi salam to him أَتَرَانِي مَا كَسْتُ لَكْ فَأَخَذْ جَمَلَكْ. Do you think that I wanted to reduce the price of the camel? فَقَالَ فَخُذْ جَمَلَكْ. Then the Prophet Islam says خُذْ جَمَلَكْ. Take your camel وَدَرَاهِمَكْ, and also your payment. فَهُوَ لَكَ. And all of this is for you. Meaning concerning فَهُوَ لَكَ, meaning concerning the camel also is for you. That's the hadith that is mentioned. So that's the hadith is mentioned regarding this transaction, a business transaction that occurred between Jabir ibn Abdullah and the Prophet ﷺ, with the Prophet ﷺ, that he made an offer to Jabir regarding this the purchase of this camel. Jabir refused. Then eventually the purchase or the offer was made again. Then Jabir accepted, and then but the shahid, that he made a stipulation, he made a condition that he was able to use the camel until he returned back to Medina. Then he would give the camel back to the Prophet ﷺ upon arrival in Medina. And the Prophet ﷺ accepted this. The Prophet ﷺ accepted this. So from this, many ahkam that can be taken, from this. So in summary, concerned, as we mentioned before, that Ibn Uthaymeen rahimahullah, that he has two explanations of this book that are matbu'. So he has like two explanations that is of this book. One, he mentions the larger explanation. It goes in more detail, and the other one, a more of a summary, but of the main points that can be taken from this hadith. So we'll kind of somewhat mention of some of the main points that can be taken from this hadith. So I mentioned before regarding that Ibn Uthaymeen rahimahullah, he mentioned regarding that this incident occurred while Jabir and other amongst the Sahaba that were coming from a ghazwa. So this was what they returned from a battle. The ulama, they differ regarding as to whether this was Ghazwatul Tabuk or Ghazwatul Dhat al-Riqa. Ibn Ḥajar rahimahullah more inclined, as mentioned by Ibn Uthaymeen, that was Ghazwatul Dhat al-Riqa. Overall, it doesn't make doesn't per se doesn't change what is mentioned in the hadith change much. Also, it showed that Jabir, that he would use of this camel that he had whenever he would travel, but upon his return, that the camel was not functioning as it would normally function. So it became much more, it was somewhat fatigued, it was more weak from this trip upon their return. So he wanted to release the camel, so to let it go. So from this, we'll start now discussing of those points that have been mentioned by Ibn Uthaymeen regarding what can be taken from the hadith. So after explaining concerning the hadith, so he mentioned regarding concerning that, he mentioned regarding that this hadith, that many benefits can be taken. So of those benefits that is mentioned regarding this particular hadith, that the first of those benefits that he mentioned, so he said, no, هذا hadith, يعني Ibn Uthaymeen, in this explanation that he mentioned, that is called Ḥajar al-Mukhtasar ala Bulugh al-Maram. So Ḥajar al-Mukhtasar ala Bulugh al-Maram, that he mentioned, he mentioned, وفي هذا حديث فواهد كثيرة, that there's many benefits that can be taken from this hadith. تبلغ أكثر من 50 فائدة. He mentioned that now this hadith, you can take, what can be extracted from it is over 50 benefits. لمن تدبر hadith, for the one who ponder over the hadith carefully. So amongst those fawahid that he mentioned, and also you find the likes of Sheikh Ashad al-Shitri have mentioned many benefits. So also Sheikh Sa'ad al-Shitri, Hafidullah, that also in his explanation of Bulugh al-Maram, also he have cited many benefits that can be taken from the hadith. Of those that he mentioned, of those benefits, he mentioned Jawaz. So we're just going to somewhat highlight some of those benefits. Jawaz tark al-insan ma lahu idha ajaza anhu, that a person can have something of that they own, something that is of their possession, of their wealth, but that thing is not of much benefit for that person. That thing of lost is benefit, or the value of that thing has been lost. So the person is allowed to free that thing. So even though it is so that thing is owned, the possession of that individual, but that, for example, that animal, its loss is benefits, not much benefit, the person have a right that a person can free that thing and let go of that thing, as there's no benefit much that he's gaining from it. So I mentioned that's something that can be done. That is something that can be done. That animal, in this case, if the person have an animal, if it was to be released, or if a person, for example, it's mentioned that if the person have an animal and he released that animal, let it go, free that animal, then because of that animal, if it was to die, or of this matter, or anything was to occur to animal, then there's no harm upon the owner, because he have released that animal, because that animal was somewhat of loss, was said it now, is strength. So he decide enough not much benefit to be taken from this animal, so he released it. So the animal can live on its own and fend for itself. So I mentioned it's something that is allowed. It is something which is allowed. So overall, then you have some further discussion regarding this. A person might say why that is the case. Then he mentioned that they can somewhat explain that in certain cases that it becomes more sinful if the person was to have this animal and not treating it right. So the person have an animal, but in their possession, but they're not treating that animal right, that becomes sinful upon that person. As in the case he mentioned concerning that, the case concerning that person who had this cat, and they were not treating it right until the cat died, and then that person was punished for this. That person was mentioned regarding that person doing something sinful for not treating that animal right. So it shows regarding so the case is rather than a person still having that animal and not treating it right, and the animal being suffered, then it's better for the person to release the animal, for the animal to either fend for themselves, or eventually, so that's better to be done than to keep the animal, and the animal is suffering. Then he also even mentioned regarding that, even those cases, the person have an animal that may have an illness or reach a stage where it's best for the animal to be, as they say, to be put away. So the animal is somewhat either ill, have an illness, where if the animal remain, it will going to be suffer, or the person unable to maintain and to treat that animal. So it's better for the person to release that animal from their suffering. So show that this is also something which can be done. That can be done based upon that the animal is suffering, and the person unable to assist the animal any further. Then it's better for the animal to remain and to suffer, and there's no help that can be given, or the person cannot find treatment. Then it's best for the animal to be released. Then also, so that's concerning that after those matters discussed regarding those things. So showing that the person that may have something of their possession, an animal, and at times may be better for the person to release it if the person find that there's no value that they are gaining from it, or other reason why they may believe that it's best for them to release that animal or that possession. Then the second of those benefits that he discussed regarding concerning Jawaz, that concern that it is allowed, that regarding Jawaz mabaya malka qubara al-qawm wa ashrafuhum, that regarding concern that it shows also that it is allowed for a person to sell or get in a business transaction. The people are said to be people of standing in the community. So a person or individuals who are known to have a standing, to have a position or rank in the community, or a standing in the community, that is okay for them for a person to get involved with a business transaction with them. So even the person, because they are held with a certain standing in the community, it doesn't exempt them or people from going into business transaction with them. So in this case, Jabir was involved with a business transaction with the Prophet of Islam, with a person of high rank and high standing in the community. So they show the permissibility of this. As the Prophet of Islam was the most honored of the people in the community. So people of honor, of standing in the community, they themselves can get into business transaction. Also, that it shows the Prophet of Islam that he was the one who kind of somewhat mentioned or offered to purchase the animal from Jabir. So the Prophet of Islam, the one who offered to purchase the animal. So it shows regarding that in a business transaction that any party that that one can make an offer to a person who possesses something that you may be interested in. So that shows that the permissibility of this. So the person may have this thing, this item. They were not thinking initially of selling the item, but then someone who see that item and see that and that there's a value to them, and they want to purchase that item, that they can make an offer. They can make an offer, and for the person to either accept or to reject. Also, he mentioned the third afaidah, the thalitha. He mentioned that regarding concerning. He mentioned Jawaz Mumakisa. So Jawaz Mumakisa, which is a form of the person who in a business transaction at times the permissibility regarding asking for a discount. So asking for a discount, or for the person to reduce the price of the item. So for example, the item is for £100. But the person said, can you reduce that item to £90? This also allowed. We said a form of discount. So it is allowed regarding discount of an item from the original price that was mentioned. That I mentioned, this is something which is allowed. Also of the benefit الرابع that he mentioned أنه يجوز, that he mentioned أنه يجوز للإنسان أن يقول للكبير أو شريف والعظيم لا. That also he mentioned of those benefits can be taken from the hadith, that it is allowed for a person to say to someone of nobility, a person of standing in the community, لا. So Jabir, when the Prophet of Islam first offered to purchase that thing from him, he said no. Jabir refused initially, then eventually he agreed, but he showed the permissibility of a person saying no. So he showed that, with respect, that at time a person may have respect and may honor a person, but still the person can still say to them, use the word no to them, may refuse certain things, doing certain things with them. So they showed the permissibility of this. Or even the person shows that also the person can refuse going into a business transaction with someone. So for whatever the reason may be, if a person choose not to engage in a business transaction with another person, the person have that right. And also in this case, when Jabir radiallahu anhu, that the offer was placed to him, he first initially refused to sell that camel. So it showed the permissibility of the person not wanting to go into a business transaction with another person. And this is to be respected. Then also he mentioned that from this Hadith al-Khamisa, ayat min ayat al-Nabi alayhi salam, that he mentioned as an ayat, we said ayat in this case concerning of the mu'jizat. So of those things that in this particular hadith, it shows concerning of those things regarding the mu'jizat as referred to as. So a miracle of the Prophet ﷺ, where the Prophet ﷺ, that he supplicated and also he kind of somewhat touched that animal, and the animal before then was somewhat feeble, weak, not functioning as expected. But when the Prophet ﷺ supplicated and also he touched that animal, then it started to function opposite this. It started to function. It became the animal started to become somewhat much more stronger, and also that so it showed that was a miracle of the Prophet ﷺ. So a miracle that occurred regarding the animal, it can somewhat regain its strength and its energy. So that's from the Prophet ﷺ dua, and also of him touching of that animal or striking of that animal. Also it shows jawaz darb al-bahima. Also from this, when the Prophet ﷺ, he can somewhat darabahu, when he stroke the animal, it showed that is something which is allowed, but it wasn't done in a way which is in a harmful way. So the Prophet ﷺ stroked the animal, but it was not done in a harmful way. So it shows regarding concern that this is allowed, but not to do so when it becomes put a difficulty upon the animal. When the person strike the animal to harm the animal, then this is wrong and not to be done. Also, it shows regarding concern that which becomes the shahid of the point that is mentioned regarding that, which is the shahid concern that Jabir in this business transaction, he put certain stipulations. And that's the shahid of the hadith. So this is the main point of the hadith, is to show regarding that the seller, that he stipulated certain condition upon selling that item. And the stipulation, the condition that he put in place was that he would sell the animal, but he would hand over the animal later after he have used it for certain things. So he mentioned, I'll continue to use the animal until we arrive in Medina, then I'll give the animal. But even though the animal was somewhat agreed to be sold before they arrived in Medina. So it shows regarding stipulating certain manfa, certain benefit. It is something that can be done regarding the item. Benefit that is used are taken from the item before it is given to the buyer. Before it is given to the buyer. So that's concerning this matter where Jabir, he stipulated that he wanted to continue to ride this camel until he arrived back in Medina. Then he would give the animal to the Prophet ﷺ. So that showed that type of stipulation or conditions that can be done. So I mentioned concerning the stipulation, any type of stipulations, that it should not be something which is haram. So the stipulation should not be regarding a matter which is haram. So that's concerning of those things that the person have to be mindful of regarding the stipulation. It doesn't violate any of the anything which is haram, and enter into thing which is haram. Then those type of stipulation or condition, then they're not to be observed. As in the hadith of the Prophet said, al-Muslimun ala shurutihim. As the Prophet mentioned that the Muslim ala shurutihim. Then it mentioned illa shartan ahal al-haram, except a shart, a condition that make permissible that which is haram, or as he mentioned, how haram al-halal, or make something which is haram halal. So that's concerned of those stipulations the person have to be mindful of regarding if we're putting any form of condition regarding that business transaction, it doesn't fall into things that are not allowed. As he mentioned in this case concerning أنه يجوز للإنسان إذا باع شيء, that a person, if he was to purchase, if he was to sell something, أن يستثنى منفعته إلى مكان معين, that a person can stipulate a certain condition that is of benefit إلى مكان معين, to a specific location. So in this case, that Jabir أو إلى مدة معينة, that a person who stipulated a condition that has to be to either that stipulation has to be relates to a specific location or a specific time period. That's a specific time period. So stipulation can be made, but has to be somewhat defined, either to a particular time, the person can use of that thing, either reach a particular location, or until a particular time frame. So that's concerning that matter. So you mentioned regarding concerning it, with certain thing that, but if there's no stipulation regarding a set time, then the ulama differ, is this allowed or not? So so if the person was to put a condition, I will use of this thing, but did not specify a particular time frame, then the ulama discuss, is this allowed or not allowed? So they mentioned regarding concerning a case that Shaykh mentioned, اختلف العلماء فيما إذا كان قال, that if the person was to say بعتك هذا بيت على أن أسكنه حتى أشتري بيتا آخر. The ulama mentioned that if a case regarding a person says بعتك هذا بيت, I also sell you this house على أن أسكنه, until I live in that house, I will continue to live in that house until I purchase another house. So the buyer is saying, I will sell you this house, or the seller is saying, I will sell you this house to the buyer, but my condition is that I will continue to live in this house that I'm selling to you until I'm able to buy a new house that I can live in. And that's the person, the seller, who's putting this condition to the buyer. Is this condition that I will continue to live in the house until I'm able to buy a new house? Is this allowed or not allowed? When will that person, how long will it take for the person to buy that, to acquire that new house? It could go for a while. There's no that deadline regarding this. So based upon this, the ulama mentioned that there's a khilaf between ulama regarding this type of condition, where there's no set deadlines. قال أنه لا يجوز. Of the ulama who mentioned, Shaykh mentioned, أنه لا يجوز لأنه مجهول لا يدري متى يشتري البيت. So it is unclear as to when the person will be able to acquire or to buy that new house. So it is majhul. The time frame for this is somewhat unknown. So he mentioned ولكن صحيح أنه جائز لا حد له حدا أكبر, that if the person was to put a time frame that becomes يجوز. So that's concerning that matter between the ulama, who of those who hold that it is not allowed if there's no time frame that is mentioned. Then he mentioned of the other fa'idah he mentioned regarding the matter. So he mentioned that husnu ri'ayat Nabi al-Islam, concerning the Prophet Islam, concerning him being concerning that the person as a person in authority, that is way of how he looked after other people. So regarding concerning that is way regarding how he dealt and treated, and his level of concern of taking responsibility over a thing, that he was the best in this manner. And he mentioned that this was the reason of this concern of Prophet Islam, that when he was with that party coming back from that battle, that he Islam, that the people were before ahead of him and he was behind them, following behind them. So he Islam would stay behind, so as he can see as to what is taking place those people. If anyone needed help, he will assist them, as in the case of Jabir. So because he was behind, he was able to identify that there were people who needed help, and he assisted them. So it shows regarding the Prophet Islam that his way of how he governed, that he governed in the best of way. So of his governance, that in this battle, he would be of the one in this scenario, he was behind, where everyone was in front, so he could see the situation and the affairs of the people. Anyone that needed help, he would assist them. Anyone was falling behind, he would assist them. So that was of his way of governance. And the Shaykh mentioned khilaf, contrary to what we find concerning the people who are, said the people who are in charge, the people who are the ones who govern today, of the leaders and the likes, and the kings and the government and those who are in responsibility, that we find that their way of how they govern is that they are always in the front. The ones who govern today, that they're always the ones ahead, where we're unable to see what is taking place behind, because they're always in the front and not leading from, and not in the back position. So that he Islam was observant regarding those things and mindful regarding those matters as a part of governance that a leader at times need to be at the back so he can know the affairs of those people that are with him and assist them accordingly. And also that he alayhi salam, that he came forward and assist Jabir, that he came forward, that he noticed the situation with Jabir, so he came forward and assisted him. So it showed the Prophet Islam that having that insight and that care, that when he saw that Jabir, that his animal was somewhat giving him trouble, his camel was giving him trouble, he came and assisted him and inquired concerning the situation and offered a way to assist him by making supplication for his animal. And then his supplication was answered. Also, he mentioned concern that, that he mentioned regarding concern other matters that he mentioned. That also he showed that of the five concern that he mentioned, al-fa'idatul al-ashira. We mentioned فيه دليل على حسن وفاء. فيه دليل على حسن وفاء. Meaning that the Prophet Islam concerned to know that he alayhi salam regarding fulfilling his promise, he was the best. So the Prophet Islam concerning observing where that he alayhi salam, that he was best where he paid, that he made a deal, an agreement with Jabir that he would purchase the animal, and then that the animal would be given to him when they arrive in Medina. And Jabir did so. The Prophet Islam also paid him immediately for the animal. And also when everything with the exchange occurred, then the Prophet Islam, he gave him the money, and also he gave him the animal as a gift. So concern the Prophet Islam concerning the Prophet Islam concerning his conduct and his conduct, that he paid him and also he returned to Jabir the animal that he bought from him. Subhanallah. Also, it shows regarding the Prophet Muhammad regarding his intention, that he always want good for people. So he bought the animal from Jabir, but his intention was to return that animal back to Jabir, and not for his own benefit. When the animal, it was much more stronger, it had more benefit because it was more stronger, more active. But then with this, he still gave back the animal to Jabir Ta'ala anhu. So he showed that he and the Prophet Muhammad regarding husnul mu'amalat ma'an nas, a good way of dealing with people, a good treatment towards others regarding this incident. So that's concerning of those benefits that can be taken. As Shaykh also mentioned other benefits that can be taken from the hadith concerning al-awqiyah, that a form of way that they used to as currency then, that they would use, which concerning I mentioned, which is over 40 dirham. We consider that equates about 40 dirham of the currency then that was used. So Islam purchased that animal from Jabir and paid him that amount for the animal. So those are the benefits that can be taken from this particular hadith, and many other things that he mentioned, but those are some of the benefits. So the shahid from the hadith is regarding that Jabir ibn Abdullah, that he stipulated a certain condition regarding the sale of that camel. The Prophet ﷺ, that he agreed, and the stipulation of that for him to continue to use that animal that was being purchased until he arrived back to his destination, then he would hand over the animal, and that agreement was considered to be acceptable. So making certain condition or conditions regarding the sale of a product or an item, then these things are allowed. But as mentioned, that those things should be of a certain type of, the condition should be within what is allowed in Islam, and also regarding to benefit, if there's any benefit to be gained from that item, that it has to be within a certain time period. It has to be with certain stipulation. The time period has to be a certain time or to a certain location. Then those things can be done as a part of the stipulation. So this, inshallah ta'ala, will end this hadith regarding this hadith of Jabir ibn Abdullah, and also the mention of the hadith that the Prophet Islam, the one who made the offer regarding buying of that item. Jabir was not the one who put it up for sale, but instead the Prophet Islam made the offer, and then Jabir of those eventually accepted and the purchase took place. So that inshallah ta'ala will end this discussion and continue after, continue the other hadith regarding what is mentioned in the book Bulugh al-Maram. وبالله تعالى توفيق وهذه السبيل والآخرة ونحمد الأمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.